From Aotea Great Barrier Island, Aotearoa New Zealand, welcome to Small Island Big Ideas, an ongoing festival of conversations and events created to take Aotea Great Barrier Island and possibly the world forward. I'm Tim Higham.
And I'm Sandy Burgham, and together with our friend Bree Biederman, we are the Small Island Big Ideas team. It's 2024, and Small Island Big Ideas is going global. Thanks to input from many of those in our own community, we've scoured the globe to find other small islands, similar in size to our own, who've had a big idea that has led to some sort of radical reinvention.
We're interested in how other small islands are facing the future. How have they acted on a big idea that's transformed their island community in a positive way? We'll be sharing those conversations and learnings on this podcast over the next few months, one small island at a time. So let's get started.
Palau is a small Pacific island country with a population of approximately 17,500 people across 340 islands. Palau is seen as a world leader in fisheries management. In 2015, they passed a law closing off 80% of the nation's exclusive economic zone to commercial fishing. Palau's National Marine Sanctuary covers 183,000 square miles of Palau's national waters. It is one of the world's largest protected areas and is larger than California. In 2018, they also implemented the Pristine Paradise Environmental Fee, which includes an environmental fee for all visitors to the country. The fee is used to fund the Palau National Marine Sanctuary and the Palau Protected Areas Network. This is a story of an island nation who are working together within their communities and government to protect their water, lands, and economy while continuing to lead the world in sustainable tourism and fisheries. Kia ora, hey, nice to see you, Kevin and Glenn. Thanks for being here today. And I'm Bree, and today we have Kevin from Palau, and I thought we should just start by saying a little bit about why we're talking with Palau here from Aotea on the Small Island Big Ideas Outside In series. And Kevin, if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we could kick off and talking about why we're speaking with you guys today.
Thank you so much, Bree. I'm glad to be here. Good morning, Glenn. I leave from Palau, and my name is Kevin Mesabaluin. I'm a project implementation manager for Palau. So my acronym is PIMP for Palau. But I've recently been given the honor to also oversee our work in FSM. So that includes Ponte, Chilks, Yap, and Kozrai. So I'm kind of overseeing the work that RARE does in both Palau and the FSM. So Western Micronesia. If you don't know where Palau is, it's about southeast of the Philippines, right before Guam. And so I'm in the conservation space, which is a really great opportunity to meet great people like you guys and share some great stories from what we're doing over here in Palau.
Oh, we are so excited. And today we have with us Glenn Edney. And those of you on Aotea will know Glenn from Ahumoana, but I will let him give a little introduction as well. Thanks for being here, Glenn.
No, kia ora. Thanks for having me, Bree, and really nice to meet you, Kevin. I've just had some friends actually have been sailing through Federated States of Micronesia, and they've been sending me back all of these reports and lots of video and live broadcasting from their boat in various places. And yeah, it's definitely now at the very top of my list of places that I need to sail to next. I'm here in Taitokoro on the Tutukaka coast. I guess I'm here because I have a really strong interest in the marine space, and my background is as an ocean ecologist, but primarily working with communities around community-based management, monitoring and management of their local marine spaces. And Aotea is a really important place at the moment because Aotea was chosen as one of 2 pilot sites for a new initiative called Ahumoana. And we're nearly at the end of that pilot program now. It's going to be coming to an end in a few months' time. Yeah, it's been pretty amazing to be part of that. So I'm super happy to be here.
Oh, we're excited too. And so just a little background about this conversation today, and Kevin, having you here from Palau. So basically we're going to speak about your fisheries management and your marine reserve. And the timing couldn't be more apt, I would say, because as we discussed, you're in an election cycle as well. And I think I tried to look it up before this call, and it maybe is not called yet, but I think we could get to that later in the call. And what I thought we could start with, Kevin, is if you could give us a little bit of a picture of what it was like on Palau before 2015, before the law was put in place for the fisheries management, then we could look at that coming into effect and how it's been, and then we'll move into what could be in the future.
Well, thanks, Bree. I'm glad I was able to get some coffee before this great question. But yeah, Palau just went through our general election. We pretty much mirrored the election cycle of the United States. Our government is pretty much the same. And so as the people in the States were heading to the poll, we were actually in tabulation because we were one day behind the US, ahead of the US. So just a quick, I'm just going to weave this,
Yeah.
but but congratulations to Ronald Whips Jr. He was reelected. So he's going to be taking his second term in office. The Honorable Tommy Yermangasao, who's also a chief and elder, he just conceded the race. So I mentioned this because you mentioned 2015, and during that time, it was Tommy who was president. And they were revolving around this great initiative of creating the Palau National Marine Sanctuary, mirroring the traditional practice of bull, B-U-L. Bull is a traditional practice where chiefs get together and recognize there's a problem either in the fisheries, in the forest, or in the community. And they have people that they send to assess the situation. Based on their recommendation, they will either institute a moratorium on access to that site, to that forest, or put restrictions on activities. And I'll give you a great example. Currently, the chiefs of Koror, which is the most populated states in Palau, uh, enforced a bull November 1st. And they enforced this bull because over the past year, we've noticed a dramatic increase in drug cases, hard cases like methamphetamine that are coming in. And the chiefs were cognizant that we're coming up on Thanksgiving, coming up on the holidays. So they wanted to kind of quiet the community down. So in partnership with the police department, they're enforcing a curfew from 12 midnight to 5 a.m. So if you're not part of any community, you're not allowed to access that community. And so that's the type of practice that the chiefs in Palau do. And this type of practice inspired the Palau National Marine Sanctuary. We were noticing that a lot of our resources were depleting. And so in consultation with the House of Traditional Leaders, then President Tommy Yermangasao launched that initiative to protect and essentially close 80% of our EEZ to any type of activity, fishing, mining, anything, and only allow 20% for domestic fisheries in partnership with Japan and Taiwan.
So
Really,
Japan
that
and Taiwan have access.
well,
Sorry, do Japan and Taiwan have access to that 20% as well? Is that what I'm understanding? To fish in or not?
right. So I'm not in government, so I can't really specify exactly how they're
Yeah.
doing it. But through agreements with other, because Palau doesn't have a robust fishing industry or a commercial fleet, so they either get into agreements with captains from Taiwan, captains from Japan to allow them fishing days in that 20%.
Right.
Right. And so it wasn't just it was based on traditional knowledge. and legislated through the National Congress. But at the same time, the study that went into that, including uh, really quick, uh, we call it quick and dirty marine spatial planning. At the same time, they did a willingness to pay for all the tourists that were coming in and asked them a simple question. If Palau closed 80% for conservation, are you more willing to come to Palau or not? Overwhelmingly, the visitors and tourists were all supportive. We're willing to pay more. In fact, we want to come visit a responsible community. So, sometimes you make policy decisions, but the process that this was enacted really started from the grassroots level, went all the way up into the domestic fisheries, included sustainable tourism, and informed the community, and it was launched. And in 2020, it was finally enforced, and it's been a ride since then.
So in 2020, which part was enforced, Kevin? Because the law was 2015, right?
Right. So in 2015, when it was passed, we had small fisheries operations, and the government wanted to give them time to transition out so they wouldn't lose their streams of revenue. And so they had 5 years from 2015 to 2020 to phase out their operations, pivot to something else, and then 2020, it was completely shut off. And these industries were servicing the domestic fisheries, including aquaculture for live bait, supporting farms of that nature.
So, Kevin, would it be fair to say that the emphasis first of all, when the legislation was put forward, and then the 5 years of working towards implementation, so was there a really strong emphasis on not only the local fishery, but how it was going to affect local people in general? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, Glenn, I think that's a really fair thing to say because honestly speaking, very few, if any, of the local artisanal fishermen would go more than 25 miles out to sea to fish. So the EEZ was really, the way the chiefs put it, they were leading the way in showing that, yes, we can conserve that exclusive economic zone, even though our fishermen don't fish. But the understanding is, I mean, if you close that down, you're pushing more and more fish into shore, and thus the local artisanal fishermen can access those pelagic species easier. And it's been happening. I work with a lot of fishers, and they keep saying the pelagic fish in the FADs, the fish aggregating devices, there are more of them and they are bigger than before.
Wow, that's fantastic, and that's sort of that's after just 4 years, and yeah, I like to say often, there are no fences in the ocean, and it goes both ways. For when we protect things, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can protect an area from everything, but at the same time, we have a protected area, and things can come in from the outside as well. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, Glenn, because I think you and your community are looking at a new initiative to strengthen your coastal fisheries management, and like you said, it takes time. You may not be able to see it in a month or 6 months, but if you keep hammering at it, the results speak for themselves.
Yep.
And I would just like to, on that note, talk about what it has been like after the transition period, Kevin, and the last 4 years, like within the local community, how that's been received, how it was initially brought about, how the social license was gained, if needed, or if it was just something the chiefs kind of said, this is what we're going to do, and then work towards that, or what did that look like within your communities on Palau?
Absolutely. Great question, Bree. So I like how uh, you phrase that. It's social, what'd you say? Social
License.
agreement?
Yeah.
License, social license.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Palau is really fortunate. We're a matrilineal society, so we have chiefs but they can't become chiefs if the women don't say you're good to be the chief. And so being a chief involves not only your immediate family, but your whole clan. And how you get picked is if you're recognized as a productive member of society. You help your neighbors, help your family, help your community. And so people in Palau tend to trust the traditional chief system and ruling system. So there's already the ingrained trust that people have for the chief system. And I'll give you a great example. There was a group of students who were doing decolonization research, and they asked one of their questions was very simple. They did a question, they did interviews through all 16 states of Palau. And one question they asked was, what brings communities together and what drives community apart? Very simple question.
Mm.
Overwhelmingly, what they were saying that about what the answers were about what brings communities together is community work that are led by the chief. If the chiefs see like there's a lot of marine debris coming in, they will call a community meeting and all members of the community will go do coastal cleanup. There's a burned out area in the savannah, the chiefs will call community meeting, will go replant that savannah.
Wow.
And so there's already that system in place where the trust exists because the chiefs live among us. And so when you talk about social license, I refer back to that it was homegrown at the community and grassroots level, this initiative to protect more than what they can see in the hopes of preserving it for the future. And once that happened, the Marine Sanctuary, the Palau National Marine Sanctuary policy covered almost all social aspects of life, including uh, strengthening the domestic fisheries, looking at sustainable tourism, and ensuring that informal market remains robust. And I just want to mention one thing about sustainable tourism. Along with that legislation, it created what you call the Palau Pledge. And I think you've heard about it.
Yes.
The Palau Pledge from Palau came out from the Palau National Marine Sanctuary. Because if we're going to lose that revenue from fishing, we need to sustain it with tourism dollars. And so that great initiative, and I think it's caught a bit of fire, really hammered home that uh, Palau is small enough that we need to pivot through away from mass tourism and focus on community-based ecotourism. And that's been the charge of Palau since 2015.
Well, Kevin, you're referring to the Palau Pledge. And as I had mentioned to you before that we spoke with Haida Gwaii last week, and they were fully inspired by the Palau Pledge and have put that into place for Haida Gwaii, which has just been amazing to talk to you guys and them last week. I actually have two questions. I'm still thinking about, you said, talking about what brings the community together and what brings it apart. And I am curious about what the response was for that.
You'll never guess. When they ask, okay, what drives communities apart? It was a very short answer, and they just said elections.
Elections.
Elections drive communities apart, and community work led by the chief brings communities together. So very simple answer, but
Wow.
very profound, I think.
And timely right now, I'd say, don't I? Yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms of the pledge, could you just say that is a really interesting way that you guys thought, okay, so we're going to lose revenue from the fisheries. And could you just talk to us about how the pledge is enforced? Like, is it on arrival to Palau? And how much is it? How much are people paying the tourists?
Great. Yeah. Great questions. So the Palau Pledge is actually, I think, I'm not sure if it's still or there's another country that's done it, but it's legislated at the national level that all visitors and people that enter Palau have to have their Palau Pledge for their passport stamp. So you stamp it as a Palau in your passport. You have your record that be mindful when you travel. Um, there's like great slogan. I'm not going to repeat it on here, but it really just asks people to travel like they're going back to their own communities.
Mm.
So if you go back to your own community, you're not gonna go and wreck the reef, burn the forest, trash the streets. You know, we want you to come to Palau and act like you belong here, you live here, or you're Palauan. And that's basically the tenet of the Palau Pledge. Because you're not going to wreck your home because you're thinking about your children and their children that want to come back to your own home. And so that's kind of where the ethos and the inspiration for the Palau Pledge came from. And if you're talking about funding, the we call it the Pristine Paradise Environmental Fee, and it's $100 that's put added on to your ticket, so you don't have to pay it at immigration when you come in. So it's all in your ticket, and when you arrive, it's already deducted. And for now, it gets split into 3 or 4 different ways. One way is for the Protected Area Network. The Protected Area Network of Palau really asks every community in Palau to nominate a special biological habitat, forest, marine area. And when the communities nominated that through a standard process, that money that gets collected from the environmental fee, uh, a percentage of that goes to support that work in the community level. So you can imagine a system where chiefs in the community say, we think it's time to restore that reef. We think it's time to replant that area. How do we do this? Where do we get the resources? Well, there's a standard way where you nominate a site, you look at historical importance, socioeconomic importance, what do you call it, species importance, and then you go through that process where natural or traditional knowledge gets supported by science because you do a biophysical assessment, and then you nominate that site and you get access to resources and funding to support surveillance and enforcement, education, outreach, training, and monitoring.
Wow.
I'm just thinking about where the little kiosk at Claris Airport would be for visitors to deposit their koha.
Yeah, they're pristine paradise.
Yeah.
I am actually just kind of blown away by that, Kevin. I just think we've been having a lot of conversations here on Aotea about that, and about like a tourism levy and what that would look like. And I think this is the best way yet that I've heard about thinking about it, the breakdown and the kind of how you're putting it back into the community is just unbelievably wonderful.
I, I have to tell you, Bree, since it started, we've seen a lot of you know, passion coming up from the local communities because they're more involved. I'm sure over time they were thinking, I wish we could do something about this, but now they can. They actually can. So, uh, I, during my work, I originally started as a banker, if you couldn't believe it.
Mm.
I was doing analysis on business business projections, and then I got recruited by a chief. He goes, "You need to come. You need to leave the bank. You need to come to the community. You need to give back." I go, "Can I at least get past my probationary period and then I'll come?" So he was like, "Yeah, go ahead." And so I was actually my first stint in conservation was a site manager to the largest lake in Micronesia in Malgayok, the capital of Palau. And I feel really proud about that stint in my time in conservation because in 2016 Palau experienced one of the biggest droughts in recorded history.
Wow.
80% of the communities could not get water, and this lasted for a few months. And I tell you what, most of the water sources dried out, and they were thinking about drilling wells. Fortunately, the largest lake in Micronesia, which I was the site manager of, called Murdoch Lake, remained productive. So we were supplying water through most communities around our island. And it was thanks to the hard work of the chiefs, the rangers, the conservation officers, planting, reducing sedimentation, making sure that the biodiversity isn't threatened by invasive. So I just want to hand it to them, and it's just a story I wanted to share.
Wow. Yeah, well, we're off grid here on Aotea, so we know, yeah, and we know a thing or two about dry summers, and it's just something that I think people are starting to talk about again this year, as looking at the forecast, and we've had a very dry spring, and yeah, and what that would look like. And we don't have a lake here, but yeah, some creeks and stuff that people are reliant on that, yeah, thinking about the same stuff, the native species planting and the invasive species and the sedimentation and how we're managing our waterways is very pertinent here on Aotea as well. Mm.
Uh, yeah, I just wanted to. I mean, that's inspiring. We really need to take water security seriously. In fact, in the face of the next 10 years, I I just want to say that there are people with ingenuity in the community level that if you give them a chance, they can try things out and even inform what people don't know about. And I'll give you an example. We were under the impression that to maintain creeks and streams, we need to remove like logs and debris from in the stream.
Mm.
Well, we were doing it. We did it in one stream and we went to a next stream. And then one elder came down and was like, "What are you guys doing? We're cleaning this so it remains productive." He goes, "Well, you're actually removing the sponge that keeps the water in the area moist. Don't remove the branches. Don't remove the logs, because that retain helps the stream retain water. In fact, don't cut grass close to the stream. In fact, you should actually be planting uh, like lemongrass to reduce sedimentation." So we thought we knew better, but we've learned and we've actually, it's become standard. We've developed a standard procedure where if you want to save a stream or a lake or any body of water, you don't cut all the way to the edge and you plant lemongrass, because lemongrass grows anywhere,
Mm.
and you plant them close enough, it creates a fence or a barrier that prevents sedimentation going in there. And don't remove the logs, leave them in there, and don't cut overhead foliage because it prevents evaporation. So we wouldn't have known this if the community wasn't involved, if they weren't involved in the project or contributing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great insight. And speaking of water, I think maybe would like to circle back a little bit just to the fisheries management and the marine reserve, because we've talked about tourism and the pledge, and I know you have a lot of people who come to Palau to dive as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how it has looked over the last 4 years with the fisheries management in place. It's been recognized across the globe as Palau as a leader in fisheries management, and now what it could look like moving forward here with this election.
Absolutely. Let me see if I got your question correctly. So, uh, what's Palau doing, and what's Palau planning to do, given its place as a global leader in fisheries management? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, there are a couple levels to this. I'm very proud of our national government when it instituted the Palau National Marine Sanctuary, and it created Palau's Vessel Day Scheme. So Palau's Vessel Day Scheme is Palau would give up its fishing days. There are countries in the Pacific that have created an alliance or forum, and they trade their fishing days to um, fleets from China, I think, or fleets from the U.S. And Palau basically gave up its right to have those fishing days, to have those fishing rights from their fishing days. What they did was actually get their allotted fishing days, stop fishing in our EEZ and use those fishing days to sell to those companies. So instead of fishing themselves, we're actually selling our quota and our time on fishing to others. And so that was a great strategy, in my opinion, at the national level. And then at the kind of between the national and the local government level, we have the networks. Like we have really great NGOs that support the community, work as a bridge between national and international agencies and Palau. So we have that group. And then we have the local governments. And in Palau, the national government pretty much doesn't own any resource. It's every single community that owns the land and the coastal waters all the way out to 12 nautical miles. And so any decision that needs to be made can be made at the local level. And some states in Palau have chiefs that are automatically have a seat in their local legislature. And so if you can see the legislative process where chiefs are in the middle of policy, you know, maybe not contributing in every single committee, but when it comes to resource management, social welfare, they're there to offer that perspective. So you have all these levels of working down together, and 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 I think it's been successful because I mean you just said Palau is recognized as a global leader in conservation, and I mentioned that because here where what we've done over the last year or 2 years is we've tried to formalize that traditional process of bull in the local government policy. So if the local chiefs want to institute a bull, instead of going through boundary demarcation, as Glenn so aptly put it, fish don't recognize boundaries. So instead of thinking about boundaries and thinking about other issues, they're thinking about the people first. The fishers are saying there's too much sedimentation going out to the seagrass. There's too much overfishing. The reefs are bleaching. Well, the chiefs are in a position now through the support of WARE, we've created 2 or 3 policies that formalize that process where from the chief to legislation to financing from the PAN network, it's all seamless now and how it works. And I think now that we've proven the pilot, now that we have a proven pilot, we hope to scale up to the rest of the communities in Palau over the next 2 years. Now, at the national level, I know President Whips is alluding to the Micronesia Challenge of 2030, where you're protecting at least 30% of your marine resources. I think President Whips and he's already announced it during our ocean last April 2022 in Palau, that he wants to change the percentage of protection versus open. So I think Palau is going to be faced with key decisions in how they manage their fisheries and how they meet the 2030 Micronesia Challenge and how to reconcile what the chiefs want and their vision for the original PNMS versus now that we want to do marine spatial planning to rework those numbers.
Kevin, can I ask on that? So that idea of the local ownership and therefore automatically the chiefs having a seat at the table when it comes to making local management decisions, because it kind of takes me back to the something I'd noted down when you were talking earlier around the local fishery, whereby the 20%, so most of the artisanal fishermen, so who are out there fishing to then sell the fish at market, I'm guessing, they were pretty happy with that because their areas that they were fishing were pretty much still open to them. And when they recognize that there's an issue within even that 20% area, so they're within their local area, even if it falls within that 20% area, they still have the ability to make local adaptive management decisions more or less in real time without having to go through a whole lot of bureaucratic process to be able to say, put in a new bull or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Glenn, absolutely. And great point, what you're talking about. Excuse me. I mentioned before, I also work in FSM, and I was just in FSM about a month ago. And FSM is a bit different than Palau, where the local communities don't really own the resources, the marine resources, where Palau owns the resources. So if the chiefs notice that there's people are over harvesting a certain species, they can immediately act and say, let's put a stop to that. Let's make it seasonal, or let's put a size limit. Uh, when I was in FSM, I was talking to this one community, and they were very passionate about starting a sandfish and rabbitfish farm right in front of their community. And so they're going through the process, doing the applications, talking to their municipal leader, representatives, getting the community together, working with NGOs to procure some of the cages, asking the community college to provide the seedlings. It was all going great. And so they started their farm. And when I went back, they told me that just about 100 yards down the shore, they started dredging for coral. And so you can see how that's kind of kicking yourself in you know
Mm.
nothing nowhere comfortable. But that's the issues that communities face. How
Mm.
can we support them so they're recognized and formalized, and the issues and decisions they make for their own behalf get honored by the decision makers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like that's supposedly what Ahumoana is about, is providing mechanisms for local communities. And I think it's probably you probably already know this, but like here in Aotearoa, virtually all of our coastline has traditional occupancy from Maori. And Aotea is definitely no different from that. And so that customary tenure of that place, which is kind of recognised, but and it within our founding document, Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi, it's definitely recognised, but it's very difficult for Maori communities to enact that because the Maori communities have all of those traditional tools that you've been talking about, that the chiefs have, but because we don't currently have the means by which local communities, ideally led by the Maori community there, the mana whenua, the people of that place, to be able to put in those restrictions, and have those restrictions have legally binding power. So at the moment, Maori can put in the equivalent of the bull, which is a rahui, that can be put in place, and it's a customary management tool, which is very powerful. But at the moment, it has no legal standing unless it's supported by a bit of legislation in the Fisheries Act called a 186A closure. And so Ahumoana is trying to find ways where we can move beyond those issues so that local communities, so the mana whenua and the wider local community can actually make those decisions and put those things in place and have them kind of legally binding. It sounds like
Yeah.
that's what you've been able to achieve there, and that's what Aotea and a lot of other places in Aotearoa would love to be able to achieve.
I, I gotta say, Glenn, it's inspiring that you guys are really dialed in and trying to support the community in any way you can. And I think you hit the nail on the head where we need that policy instrument to at least recognize that there exists traditional knowledge. Stewardship has been ongoing for thousands of years. And it just makes business sense to let the people who were born to be stewards continue to be stewards. And you know, every place is different politically, and in terms of social demographics. But one thing remains the same: if you're passionate about and you keep working at it, and you get the right kind of people together, you know, I have this saying about when I'm in a call with other red staff, they ask me, what do you do? And I go, the three M's: meetings, maps, and meals. So I always fall back to those three M's. And you got to keep talking to these people and saying, you know, let's go have a meal somewhere. Let's look at some maps. You know, and keep on the keep on there, because they'll come around, and you know, we're even though we're oceans apart, we're still the Pacific family. And I think people tend to forget that, especially during election times, and they think everything's so at the tipping point. But no, our Pacific ways tell us to slow down, take a breather, and take another look at it. So I'm glad. Thanks for sharing, Glenn.
Can I ask one more question based around this a
Yeah,
little bit? It's actually going back to the tourism aspect and how that relates to fishing, because I'm imagining that aside from people who want to come diving, there's probably tourist fishing that goes on, which we would put that in the class of recreational fishing. So rather than artisanal or
right.
subsistence fishing, you know, people are doing it for fun. It's because they love to go fishing. Um, and and that seems to me to be something that's quite similar for Aotea, where quite a large percentage of the community are subsistence fishers. You know, that fish that they catch is a hugely important part of the protein source for the family. And at the same time, uh, Aotea, 93 kilometers away from Auckland City, 1.7 million people, one of the highest per capita boat ownership in the world. So we get a lot of people coming out to the island recreational fishing. And we have central government imposed daily recreational bag limits for particular species. And that's one of the things that we are trying to look at, is whether, you know, a community needs to have more control over that huge influx of people. And I'm just wondering if that's an issue over there as well, with the kind of recreational tourism fishing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely an issue here as well, and uh, especially what I've seen. It's an issue where there's a lot of tourism going on in the communities. It exacerbates the issue. And I'll give you an example. In 20 from 2015, 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017, Palau went from 40 to 50,000 visitors a year to 160,000 a year
Wow.
versus a population of less than 20,000.
Wow.
And so this is what happened. Tourist sites were overcrowded. Price gouging happened for certain foods. You couldn't book a hotel room, and some specialty dishes like the coconut crab, the mango crab, went from $8 a pound to sometimes hundreds of dollars a pound. And so no local would be able to afford that.
Mm.
And and then in 2018, 2019, here comes big bad COVID and shut everything down. For 2 years, Palau had zero visitors. And at the time, I was actually the director for the Bureau of Tourism. And so I recommended to the president, like, okay, time to restart, but let's restart green. And so I was able to start putting some policy pieces in place to increase the value of artisanal products. That's not just fishing, but also root products like taro, tapioca, vegetables. I was like, look, the tourists come, they want access to these foods, but we need to protect these artisanal producers from the informal market from price competition and gouging. And one thing we were doing was like, okay, instead of tourists going to restaurants while they're touring the communities, we'll have the local women's group prepare traditional dishes in such a way that I wanted to start them thinking about how to produce quality instead of quantity. because the Pacific way is the more food's on your table, the better you are. No, 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 no. Tourists want colorful, small, Instagrammable pictures that they want to post. So dragon fruit, pineapple, nice fried fish. And so we started working with the communities with the help of Japan and some uh, some foundations to develop ecotourism. Because when people come to Palau to dive, they typically either do a 5 day or 7 day trip. And before they leave, they can't dive for at least 24 hours. And so, if you can imagine
Mm.
160,000 people with a day to spare, we want them to go to the communities. We don't want them to stick around downtown. And so that was one effort in the formal market. And then in terms of fishing, uh, I'm actually starting a project that actually can grade reef fish. So you know how you can grade tuna, where you say, oh, this is fatty tuna, it's about how many percentage. A lot of the communities fish reef fish. And so the project aims to create, uh, it's going to create a system where we can measure the exact percentage, the amount of fat within any reef fish. And so we're trying to do Wagyu reef fish, if you know what I mean. And it's been done before. It's been done before. And I know this one community that did a whole year of analyzing the target species. And after that year, within the next 16 months, they raised the revenue by the local fishermen to 30%, just because they were certifying better than average quality fish.
Yep. And at the same time, was there some checks and balances, to make sure that the reefs weren't getting overfished of particular species?
Yeah, absolutely. We we while I was at the Bureau of Tourism, we started what we call the Boat Owners Association for Tourism. And so a
Okay.
lot of the boat operators, we wanted to bring them in and say, let's get registered, let's get organized, because some of them were reporting very bad behavior. People were walking on the reefs, sticking things into giant clams, breaking off coral, collecting sand, beach clams, and unsustainable behavior. And so we wanted to get all the boat drivers and tour operators together and created an organization where every year they have to come get certified and registered. And their registration depends on how many infractions or how many violations that they reported, supported, or caught. And that way we were able to get them kind of more involved. So instead of us being across the table from each other, we were actually on the same side of the table, helping to inform the tourists what good behavior looks like.
Cool. Yep. So it's kind of like it's not actually trying to exclude anybody. It's trying to include everybody, but make sure that everybody, and I guess the thing that how I would frame it for myself anyway is making sure that the clams are at the table too, and that, or the reef's voice is at the table as well, and so we need to make sure that there's, if it's pretty hard to get a coral reef or a kelp forest sitting around a table, but if you've got somebody who, a human who can represent the voice of that reef around that table as well, and just always aiming for that balance. And I think that's always something I notice when conversations are happening around things like tourism. They often become economic, and I think many places have seen the negative effects of unrestricted tourism, and it's really great to hear, thinking about all these different ways that we can approach this issue and come up with creative ways that we can approach these issues, so that we get away from the idea of saying, no, can't do this, no, mustn't do that, and we start thinking about things that we can do instead.
Yeah. no, I like how you frame that, Glenn. It's I like to term it solutionology. So instead of just calling out the problem, offer a solution, and people will respond better to that, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And if I agree with all of that, I just wanted to ask a little question in the same vein as the tourism. So you just explained that like tourism skyrocketed between 2015 to 2019. And then was it in COVID lockdown when the Palau Pledge came into place, or was that before this?
No, it was before then. It was before then.
And it was still the those tourists, so those numbers of 40,000 to 150,000, all that, every one of them had contributed with the
Yeah.
pristine paradise.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Every single one of the 160,000 people for a couple years contributed $100 to the Pristine Paradise environmental fee, and in turn contributed to the communities in site management for site management.
Yeah, wow. And are your tourism numbers up at that same level again now after COVID?
Uh, we're still recovering. I think we're up to 50 or 60,000
Wow.
projected for 2024. So, but then that begs the question, what's the right number?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that's a question that we've been trying to answer, but we've used several methods, including ambient noise, crowd sizes, um, but we just can't all agree on the same number.
Yeah, because I'm just assuming here that having 150,000 people when the country's only 20,000, or that's maybe too many, and also
Yeah,
in line with sustainable tourism for everything, for the islands, for the waters, for the communities, for the whole thing.
yeah.
Yeah, so it is interesting to say, okay, well, what is a good number? So we're supporting our community, but our environment is healthy and stable and protected and all that stuff. Yeah. So,
Well,
no, go ahead, please, Kevin.
oh, sorry. Well, now that we're talking about it, there was kind of a gauge or a level that we could have used, or we can still use, because I already said that a percentage of the environmental fee goes to the communities to manage the sites. Well, if you look at the numbers and you see all the sites and they're asking for a certain amount of budget to, to do site management,
Oh,
if you want to find a right number, you can start with matching that level of resourcing needed to manage those sites. And that could be the optimum number.
yeah.
If we're bringing people in and they're able to support work that maintains and sustains these sites, then that could be a break even point. And then if you want to tack on more, that's up to you. But it starts somewhere. And I also wanted to mention that even though the Palau Pledge started 2015, 2016, a lot of the tourists that were coming were first time travelers from mainland China.
Wow.
And so they weren't, they weren't what you would call worldly yet. They were still learning how to be tourists. Because what happens when there's a boom in tourism, a lot of the operators become vertically integrated. Their own restaurants, their hotels, their own flights, their own travel agents. Where we want it horizontally integrated. And
Yeah.
so we saw like from within a couple of years, the mass of the numbers of tourists came from biggest increase from men in China because of that vertical integration. And we slowly started to integrate those overnight tour operators by making sure that they register every year and they're not just fly by night trying to make money. But yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, I don't want to. Did you have a question, Glenn, or I'll ask one too?
Oh, yeah, I was just sort of sitting there doing the sums in my head a little bit, population of Aotea, permanent population 1,250, guesstimates as to how many people come just in the summertime, 30, 40,000. So yeah, there's a bit of a ratio thing going on there, but at the same time, it's also recognized how important those tourism dollars are for the economy of the island as well. So, I guess it's probably the same in probably just about every island that has visitors. There's these challenges in finding balance. You have a finite space with finite resources, and usually some finite services available. And in the case of Aotea, that finite is infinitesimal. There are all of those challenges. At the same time, what I've experienced on the island too is that there's a real, often quite a festive feel when there's a lot of people there. It's summertime and it's sunny and it's a beautiful place and everybody's sort of having a good time, and so just finding a balance with those things. And I think for me, I always take it back to what's happening in the moana, and making sure that the moana is having a good time with all of these people here as well. And yeah, I think we've got a ways to go to get to the point where we've probably got balance there. And but just hearing some of the things that you guys have done there, it's given me I've got a few notes written down here to take to the next Ahu Moana meeting.
Yeah.
The 3 M's: meetings, maps, and meals.
Yeah.
And that is perfect, Glenn, because everyone does want to come to your meetings, and it's probably going to be at a local restaurant because we have, if you get it, you can bring your maps for sure.
Yeah, I'll bring the map.
Wow. And I'm just conscious of time here and that we've just had an hour together. I just wanted to say I'll lead us towards a wrap up, but unless either one of you have something else to contribute at the moment, I don't want to cut you off.
I've got so many questions for you, Kevin. I might have to come over and visit. And
I was thinking the same thing, Glenn.
Yeah.
We'll go on a trip.
But I guess one of the things I was really interested in is Palau has been an inspiration for not only the rest of the Pacific community, but in fact for the whole world. And Palau almost single-handedly quadrupled the amount of fully protected area of the ocean. And so that was a huge gift that you gave to the world, but also a huge responsibility. And now you've potentially got some changes coming up. And I just wondered about if you had any sort of reflections on some of the pressures that people might have been feeling, pressure of expectation from outside and things like that, because it feels to me like that's something that people on Aotea, potentially have to deal with as well. Like I said, with that 1.7 million people right on the doorstep. And Aotea is still it's the most pristine place in the whole of the Hauraki Gulf, which is the body of water. You've got Aotea as its English name is Great Barrier Island, because it is a barrier from the Pacific swells. It breaks those Pacific swells as it comes into the Hauraki Gulf and onto the shores of the lovely city beaches in Auckland. So there is those big expectations. I'm just wondering if you've got any reflections on that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Glenn, I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure hearing about you and your community and what you're doing. And that's one of the things I always take away whenever I meet other Pacific Island, especially Pacific Islanders in the conservation space. And we always have this passion because we live here, we grow here. Our blood is the air, our blood is the ocean, and But yeah, I I put it this way. Um, One of the main goals why I'm in the conservation space is not just to teach my children what the proper way is, but also offer them opportunities to come back to the same wonder and amazement that I saw when I was young. I want them to have the same story. And regardless of the pressure, because islanders, we leave our islands to broaden our minds and absorb other cultures. We must always come back. You mentioned how small your population is. Palau, we're getting to a point where most Palauans will live outside of Palau. And so I think, talk about outside pressure, but to put it metaphorically, we need to equalize that pressure by bringing back more of our local citizens back to our islands who absorb that knowledge and help us. So we're not doing this alone because uh, I know I know my CPU is going to get outdated in a few years, and we need that next model to come in and take over the work. And so I hope that what we're building and what we're struggling to do inspires those people that, yeah, come back home, help in the good fight, and let's make this a home that we'll be proud of. And so, yeah, but thanks for sharing. I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, that's amazing, Kevin. And on Aotea, the tangata whenua, the Maori people of that place, they're called Ngāti Rehua, Ngāti Waiki Aotea. And I know that they've been working really, really hard to bring some of their whānau, their family, back to the island. But there needs to be things for them to do. There needs to be work. There needs to be
Yeah.
the ability for them to look after their family and things like that. And it just occurred to me too that there's some settler families that arrived on the island much later in the 1800s, but they're fifth generation families as well. And so there's now the two partners of our founding document, Te Tiriti, they have this history with the island. And so when we look forward, we've got to look back at that history as well, and take responsibility for that going forward. So yeah, I appreciate what you just said.
Well, let me applaud you for that statement because I think it's important to recognize where we all came from in order to move forward. So good on you.
Mm.
Kevin, and I would just like to say, and thank you to you as well, Glenn. It's just been a pleasure to meet you and to hear about all your work, you as a person and Palau as a country and everything you guys are doing. And I'm truly inspired and I'm actually not sure how we got connected with you, but I am very grateful. And I just can't thank you enough for being here with us today. And I hope that we stay in touch, and I hope you have a wonderful trip and that your MAPS meetings and goes well.
Am I allowed to ask another really quick question?
Yes.
So I realize that we haven't talked about, but you work with an organization called RARE, RARE, and I just wonder, is it possible to give a 30-second synopsis of what RARE is and what it does?
Thanks, Glenn, for letting me plug the good old NGO. But Rare is Rare is an international NGO based in Arlington, Virginia. However, we do have people working in 8 countries and hundreds of communities across the world. What we bring to the value, what we hope to bring as behavior change specialists, is to really support the community reach their goals. So if a community wants to formalize a process, if you want to designate it a marine space, a marine area, whatever they want to do, Rare comes in and facilitates that process through a wide variety of tools. And we've been very fortunate that we've had some really good successes in Palau. One I just want to quickly mention is it was a campaign called Turtles Are Our Friend. And it's been over 25 years. And we've seen that behavior campaign, has changed the mindset of at least 50% of the students, where they are moving away from turtle as a protein and looking to save more turtles. So behavior change takes time. And if you want to learn more about Rare and what it does, you can go to rare.org. Or if you want to come and meet me, I'm inviting Glenn and Bree to come to Palau and I show them around. and really, I'm just inspired. And I took a quick look at some of the podcasts that I've been done, and I've been also inspired by some of the guests you've had on show. So thank you both very much for the opportunity.
Thank
Great,
you
mate.
so
I'm
much.
putting on my longest free diving fins. Give me the highest speed. I'm swimming. I'm on my way.
Well, thank you both so much. And yeah, again, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you both have a wonderful weekend. And I think that we'll continue to be in touch, and I look forward to it.
Great. Thanks, Bree.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sulang, Kia ora.
Kia ora. See you, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Small Island Big Ideas wish to thank our sponsor, Island Gin, probably the world's most sustainable gin company, distilled with Manuka bush honey and bottled in recycled glass right here off-grid on Aotea Great Barrier Island.
And thanks to our partner in crime, Bree Biederman, researcher Emma Ricketts, Aotea FM, Luke Nola and friends, and the local board of Aotea Great Barrier Island's Auckland Council, and the Festival of Adult Learning.
Is there anybody else we need to thank?
Oh, probably half the island, Sandy, but...
and Georgie, let's give a shout out
my
to
daughter Georgie.
Yeah.
The crew at Aotea FM, Linda
Absolutely.
Rowe and Renee Freeland.
Oh, and everybody from the island who's given us the great ideas too.
Yeah, that's right. They keep coming, don't they?
Absolutely.